Hello, I'm Judd Wallenbrock, and I'm fortunate to be the president and CEO of C. Mondavi and Family, which is home to Napa Valley's oldest and most historic winery, Charles Krug, and you're listening to From the Heart, presented by Orange Kiwi Consulting.
All right. Well, as you hear, my guest today is I'll say my great friend, but fairly new friend. How I know Judd is for the Center for Family Business at Cal State Fullerton. Every year we do a Family Business Hall of Fame, and Peter Mondavi of the family that he represents was scheduled to be our speaker in April, and then COVID decided to throw a curveball at us a little bit. And so everything went online, as everybody watching and listening here knows today. And I had the good fortune with all of this to get to know Judd, who runs Charles Krug, C. Mondavi Family Winery up in Napa, as he mentioned. So Judd, it's great to see you. I love your background there. It's we both, for those that are listening, we're both representing the brand today. So hopefully those, when you watch and listen, you'll be inspired to open up a bottle of this great wine. So Judd, it's nice to see you. I know you guys have had a lot of fires up there in your area recently. Can you tell me a little bit about the role that you played? I know what it is, and I read a lot of the stuff in the media, but just kind of the inspiration to really step in and be a support for the first responders and to really utilize your space there to help out with your neighbors.
Yeah, right. Well, it's a very tight community. The wine industry in general is a very tight community, and the fires hit, and the very first thing we do as a company, anytime there's some kind of a disaster or there's some kind of emergency, which there seems to be more of them going on these years, the first thing we do is we do a head count. We do that phone tree activity to find out that who and where all of our staff is, to make sure that first and foremost they're safe. We did have a few people that were evacuated, but fortunately nobody lost their homes. Although some people did have a little bit of damage done to their property. But once we figured out that we were all safe, it became pretty clear that the next step was to sit down with my senior management team and say, okay, now what can we do to help? We're sitting here in an incredibly strategic location in St. Helena, and the fires were all in St. Helena and north of us. And we have a large swath of land that the estate itself is about 150 acres, and several of those acres are completely empty. And so we kind of started brainstorming on what we could be doing to help. Can we help evacuees? Can we help, CAL FIRE? And the name PG&E came up. My COO, Jeff Richardson, is ex-PG&E. And that became a natural thing for us. So we called up PG&E, and within 2 days they had set up base camp there, and they're still there today, and will be for probably another couple of weeks. There's literally hundreds, almost thousands of power lines and power poles and everything that needs to be put back into place. And that's what these guys are doing.
So a lot of cleanup and setting it back up, basically, is what you're saying with what these guys are now doing. So
yeah, they're getting power to people.
Yeah. So talk about that relationship. You say, obviously, you've got a lot of competitors around you, but it sounds like as an industry, you collaborate a lot more than you compete. And that's really my philosophy. I was told by my dad when I graduated from college, one of the many pieces of wisdom he gave me was collaborate wherever possible, compete as little as possible. Sounds like that's a pretty similar philosophy up there from how you're talking about, first of all, checking on your staff, making sure everybody there is okay, but also checking on your neighbors. Talk about that collaboration that goes on up there in that area.
Yeah, it's I think it's just inherent in the industry, and it's also inherent in the family that owns C. Mondavi. Peter and Mark Mondavi are the co-proprietors, and we're all family. And I think that, the industry treats itself like family. We are family, and it's just I think it's just the nature of the area, and it could be even just the agricultural side of things. Remember, even though it's wine and very romantic, fundamentally it's still just agriculture. We're just growing things, and we're helping each other out with everything. It's not just fires. It's equipment if they need equipment. It's expertise if they need expertise. It's pretty competitive out in the sales environment,
sure.
But when it comes to the actual winemaking and our own place, everybody's very, very supportive and tries to help everybody else out.
So big picture question here. What do you love about working? I mean, I'm diving into like the emotional side. And as you know, the podcast is called From the Heart, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But you've been doing this for 40 or so years. Hard to believe when people see the video here that you've done anything for 40 years because you look like you're 29.
Yeah, right.
But, you know, yeah, butter you up just a little bit there, waiting for my next shipment of wine. Yeah. What do you love about it? You've done this. Anybody's done anything for 40 years and still has the smile on their face like you do today. Obviously there's a lot, but what comes to mind when I say, what do you love about just this industry and what you do?
I think, you know, the biggest thing about the wine industry is that it's an industry of passion. You know, it's you got to love what you're doing, because, you know, trust me, you don't make a lot of money doing it.
Yeah.
So you're really making a lifestyle choice. And I think that when I was, you know, pretty young, actually, when I first got out of undergraduate, I was talking to my ex-girlfriend's mother, who was trying to figure out, okay, what are you going to do with your life? You know, you're pretty serious with my daughter here. And I said, you know, I really don't know what I'm going to do, but I do know this. And that is that I'm not going to let my job dictate my lifestyle. I'm going to let my lifestyle dictate my job. And to which she responded, well, good luck with that.
Yeah. And 40 years later, here you are, right?
And but that's the choice that I made. And actually, I got bit by the bug really early. I have an older brother who, when he was 28, got into wine. He's 12 years older than me, so I was 16. Took my first trip to Napa Valley because I could drive. I was a co-driver, and that was in 1974. So none of this had really been built up like the way it is. It was very very quiet, no restaurants, anything. And I just fell in love. I think the day I drove into the valley, I fell in love with the idea of it. You know,
what do you think has contributed the most to that growth from what you saw in 1974? So let's do the quick math, 46 years ago to today. You've seen a lot of changes to the geography, not the geography as far as the layout, but as far as the buildup out there. What have been some of the big contributing factors to the boom?
Well, you know, I think it's culture. So, you know, the culture of Americans back in 1974 didn't drink wine. You know, the per capita consumption was horrendously low. And frankly, it's still quite low. But it was probably at that point in time, I'm going to guess it was in the like maybe 1.2 gallons per capita. And we're at about 3 gallons per capita right now, which doesn't sound like much. Particularly when you compare that to our European friends who are at 15, 16, 17, 19 gallons per capita. It's part of their culture, right? They're born with it. We're not. And particularly when it comes to sort of the middle of the country, it really all started on the two coasts. And then the East Coast really started with European wines, and then California came out with, you know, our California wines, and slowly now culturally it's come into the middle of the country, and wine is now, you know, an accepted part of the table, and that's, I think it's culture.
Do you think that's the migration of people coming from various parts of the world to the United States? Because in 74, we were a much more, you know, less diverse culture than we are. We're seeing that in our election right now. Diversity is the name of the game. It's the conversation. Do you think that has a lot to do with it as well?
That and the ability to travel. So, you know, a lot of people now have, you know, I took my backpack and did Eurail pass through, you know, through Europe, you know, and suddenly you're tasting great wines that are everyday wines on the table, and they don't cost an arm and a leg. So I think it just it's both. It's people coming in. That's how Napa Valley was really founded. It was founded by immigrants who wanted to have the old country here, and it looked like the old country. So they planted grapes and made wine, and voila, we've got Napa Valley.
Do you think that now, let me ask you a question, because you and I know each other. We've gotten to know each other fairly well over the last 8 months or so. We didn't even know each other existed prior to that, but now in 8 months, I'm proud of the fact that I can consider you one of my closest friends that I've made this year. I'm a novice when it comes to wine. I mean, from age 18 to age 50, I didn't drink, you know, and we've had conversations about that in the past, and I don't drink a lot even now, but I mean, I do know what flavor I like, and certainly I tend to make my choices on brands based on the family businesses that I work with. I'm very loyal to the family business brands that I know because I know the families, and not just because I'm supporting the family. It's not that as much as it's just, I try it because of the relationship, and it's like, hey, I really like the coffee I drink and the wine I drink and the food that I eat. If I know the people behind it, it makes me want to choose them more frequently. Is part of that, 3 gallons to, per capita versus the 15 or 16, maybe a lack of understanding or knowledge? And what can you teach me about wine? If let's just forget that people are watching and listening today, teach Ed Hart about wine. How do I know, other than the label on the bottle, how do I know a good wine from a bad wine?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And I think the thing about wine is that you just got to try it. You don't have to know everything about it. I talk about this a lot, where interestingly, I think that the wine industry is a lot like technology, even though we're the polar opposites. We're the least technological industry in the world. We haven't changed in 8,000 years, for God's sakes.
It's a grape and it becomes a wine, right? Yeah.
But realistically, like I say, it's like high tech, because we all think we're supposed to know more about technology, right?
Yeah.
We're supposed to be smarter with our computer, and it's intimidating. And so we just kind of fall back to what we kind of know. Oh, I'm an Apple guy, or I'm an IBM guy, or something like that. And I'm really happy with this software. I'm just going to use this software. Don't change it up on me. And I think wine has that same problem. I think people just feel like, it's too intimidating. I just really, it's too hard to get involved. I don't want to embarrass myself, that kind of thing. And realistically, wine is just such a simple thing. And, you squish grapes and it makes alcohol, CO2, and heat. The heat and the CO2 go away and we keep the alcohol. Boom, you got wine.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of other steps that go in there to make some nuances behind it, and it is truly a wonderful sort of mishmash of science and art, and I think when it comes to anybody who wants to enjoy wine, the first thing I would do is I'd find a wine shop that has somebody that kind of understands, that a good wine shop should ask you the question, what have you had before that you like? Okay. And then he or she will then, sort of walk you through, hey, if you like that, you might like this. It's relational database stuff, right? If you like this, you might like that.
Sure.
And that person becomes kind of your guru. And if you can't do it with a wine shop, there's certainly, now we're in an app-based types of things. Vivino is amazing for that, or even just Facebook. Ask your friends. We have so much more available to us to get recommendations from people that we trust and like. And there's no substitute for just trying it.
Yeah, I've actually seen that on a lot of apps and things that have come my way of, what do you like to eat? What do what are your preferences, and so, and then it pairs it down to, okay, then try these. They talk about pairing. They talk about, if you like steak, then drink a red wine. If you like fish, drink a white. And maybe I'm saying it wrong. I don't know.
Yeah.
Talk about pairing. I mean, again, I want to I'm fascinated by this, and I have a lot of friends that I know are as well. And my friends are the ones that listen to this podcast. So I'm going to assume that, we're not a huge audience yet. We'll maybe get there, but right now, I think that there's an education there that some of us will enjoy. Just, you and I have always joked about, you like to pair music.
I was gonna say that.
Yeah, I figured you might go there. So go there. That's fine. I love it.
Well, I think, when it comes to wine, those of us in the industry think of wine as food. It's not an accompaniment to food. It's something that goes, on the plate virtually, because the wine tastes better with food and the food tastes better with wine. It's just that simple. So from our standpoint, it really is food. But then it's experimentation. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing right. Whatever you like is what's, it's like art, right? It's if you or it's like a book, well, I like that book, but you didn't like that book. Well, it's subjective.
Yeah.
So I think the key is to try a lot of different things. Now, there are plenty of resources that will help you. Wine and cheese go together like orange juice and sunshine.
Peanut butter and jelly. Yeah, exactly.
It's a perfect pairing, right? But there's nuances within that. If I'm going to have we have a Sauvignon Blanc that's really got great acid. It's really fresh. It's bright. And if I was going to have a big creamy cheese with that, it wouldn't really help. It would taste fine, but they don't, sort of help each other out. But if I had a nice, either a dry aged cheese, or if I had something that was like a goat cheese, a chev or something like that, something else that's high acid, they kind of balance each other out and work well. So you start learning what goes well together and what doesn't. I think maybe I've shared with you before, I grew up in Southern California. I was a surfing baseball player, and Mexican food was part of my everyday life. Yep. And my guilty pleasure is chips and salsa. To this day, I'm 63 years old, and it's chips and salsa. Darn it, that's what I'm going to eat. And it's hard to find a wine that goes well with it. Well, as it turns out, Sauvignon Blanc goes great with it. But how did I find that out? Experimentation.
Well, I did chips and salsa for dinner last night with a cab of yours, so that went pretty well as well. Just so you know.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. So, how does your sales team? So you talk about how obviously up there where you are, a lot of very collaborative. Use the word that I used earlier, and it's much more competitive out in the sales industry. Just last word on this. Maybe I might come back to it, but before I get into a little bit more of your background and how you got where you are today. How does your sales team differentiate against the competition? I walk into a grocery store, and I've done this with you before. I've taken pictures of the shelf at a grocery store and sent it to you and said, help, I need something. And how do you differentiate from the thousands of brands that are on the shelf?
And how I think that's where part of my background is packaged goods. I did do a stint at Nestle. So classic packaged goods and this is where be it wine or toothpaste or combs or whatever, there's similarities, and that is making sure that you have very, very clear positioning and how you want to be perceived in the marketplace, and then you tell that story and you reinforce that story with all the things that you've got, the package, the pricing, it's the marketing piece, and in our particular case, we are fortunate that we've got two kind of big stories behind us. One is that Charles Krug is the oldest winery in Napa Valley. It's the place that started it all. And so there's only one winery that can say that.
Yeah, exactly. Only one oldest. Yeah.
And then the other thing is that we're still family owned in an environment where there are lots and lots of family owned wineries. The vast majority in Napa are, but the perception isn't that way. The perception is that they're all owned by large corporations, and many of the big names are owned by large corporations, and nothing wrong with that. But I think there's integrity and an authenticity that goes along with being family owned, and we're in our fourth generation of Mondavi ownership too. So it's not like a fly-by-night operation.
Exactly. Not, like where these guys come from.
Yeah.
So talk about the family a little bit. I've had the opportunity and the honor to get to know Peter a little bit. I've yet to meet Mark, but I've gotten to know Peter virtually. We've had phone calls and now a lot of Zoom calls this year. Yeah. And you have been gracious enough, you and Peter both, to appear on some other episodes of things that we've done with, the Family Business Center at Cal State and with Allie and Orange Kiwi and so forth, our sponsor. Can you talk just a little bit about what drew you? 40 years in the industry, a lot of options. You've run your own wineries. You've worked for other wineries. You are kind of that free agent. Here we are in free agent season now of baseball, as an example, where the key players are picking where they get to go, and there's a lot of factors beyond money. And you said you're not getting wealthy doing this, so you really are making the choice of where to work based on a match. So talk about that family and how you feel like you're a match in this.
Yeah, it's. I really hope they're not listening to this.
I won't send it to Peter.
But I will tell you that when I was interviewing for the job, almost 4 years ago, I was sitting there with Peter and Mark, and they asked me the question, why do you want this job? And I said, look, I've been in the business for close to 40 years at that point in time, and there's kind of three jobs in the wine, three sort of places that you can work. You can either work for yourself, and I had my own label for 15 years, so I did that. You could work for some soulless corporate entity, which I've also done that, or you can work for some dysfunctional family.
Oh, there you go. Nice. And that's not what you're doing now, but yeah.
And I choose to put the fun back in family dysfunction.
There you go. Yeah, you definitely.
Fortunately, the Mondavis laughed at that.
Yeah.
And the name Mondavi is very it's very famous amongst a lot of people. Although we will tell you that the younger generation they're not born knowing that name anymore, but I was also fortunate enough to work for the other side of the Mondavi family, which is Robert Mondavi. And I think when people think of the name Mondavi, they think of Robert Mondavi.
Sure.
And because he was quite the promoter and quite a sensational guy, I worked for them from 92 through 01. Unfortunately, so in 2004, they sold to a large corporation, Constellation. So we're in this very interesting situation where we've got a family named Mondavi that owns Charles Krug. So our name isn't on our label, but it's owned by Mondavis. Robert Mondavi, which is not owned by Mondavi. So the label that says Mondavi
take
doesn't
notes,
have any.
folks. I should have said at the beginning, but take some notes. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Robert Mondavi, the company that says Mondavi on it, doesn't have any Mondavis in it. So it's like clear as mud, right? It's our identity crisis is what I call it. But the truth is, Robert actually started at Charles Krug. It was all one family. Cesare and Rosa Mondavi were the generation one. Peter and Robert were generation two. In '65, Robert left and started Robert Mondavi Winery, and then he had his family. And meanwhile, Peter and his two sons, Peter Jr. and Mark, continued on at Charles Krug, and to this day, they're still there. Peter Sr. Lived until he was 101, died 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago now, and basically worked until he died. His two sons have been working there all of their lives. They're now getting to that age where they're, not too far away from retirement. And then there is a fourth generation that is also involved with the company, both on the board of directors and some people involved with actual either sales or some other elements of the company. And they're all ambassadors to the winery as well.
Are you finding in your role, I see this a lot in family business, and maybe this wasn't the reason why they looked to go outside to bring in a non-family CEO like you are, but certainly a benefit of your experience in your role now is that you can potentially be that bridge between Peter and Mark and the next gen after them. Not that you're spending your time grooming the next generation, maybe you are, but do you find that you are spending some time in your role as CEO of maybe figuring out who the next person will be, if it is family or?
Yeah, part of that. The real mission that I have for the company is to create a sustainable business model so that multiple generations of Mondavis can own it forever. I mean, that is what I'm doing. It's staging the company for long-term generations. In fact, our model that I employ a lot is the Antinori family in Italy. They're in generation 26.
Yeah, one of the oldest, if not the oldest winery, right?
Yeah, and I joke, I'm pretty sure their first winemaker was Jesus.
Yeah, but, exactly. No doubt about it. Yeah, different process now, but yeah,
that's exactly it. Yeah. But if we can stage a business model that enables that to happen, whether or not a Mondavi is running the company or not, they're still going to be the owners, and that's what we're shooting for. So that's my job, is to create that business model. I'm not necessarily looking to groom anybody, but if that happens, great. I'd love it. I think it would be phenomenal.
So you weren't charged with that when you came in. Hey, help us find our successor. What do you like? Here's your chance to share just a little bit about. Let's talk to that non-family executive in a family business out there in America or wherever that may be listening to this today. What do you love about that role of not being family? I mean, granted, maybe if you could own it, you would. I don't know. But I mean, you obviously find a tremendous amount of joy in what you're doing. I've talked with Peter enough about you and with you and Peter together that, the perception and the reality is that you're doing a great job leading the winery and the family business. What would you tell that non-family executive that's really trying to figure out their wheelhouse within the family-owned company?
Right. Well, I'll say exactly what I told to the Mondavis, because remember, there's two sides of the family. There's two brothers.
Yeah.
So there's always that kind of relationship, and then there's their children and spouses. So altogether, there's 10 of them, and as you can imagine, families maybe they are all on the same page, but sometimes they're not. I mean, all of our families are like that, right? So, part of my role is to be that great moderator. I'll just tell you what I told them when I first came on board, and that is that I am family agnostic and I'm company evangelistic. Awesome. And that is what my recommendation to anybody who's in dealing with a family operation is that you have to divorce yourself from, family favorites or anything like that. You have to be making business decisions, not necessarily emotional decisions.
No, that's great, because I do know a lot of non-family executives who feel torn. They feel like they're representing the family more than the company, and that just
Right.
doesn't work. I've seen, a few examples, without naming any names, where they brought in either someone internally that was already with the company and moved them up to the corner office,
Yeah.
but they became such I won't say the word puppet, that's not the right word, but certainly, yeah, they became family evangelistic and almost company agnostic, to reverse what you said.
Right.
So I think it's fantastic advice.
And kind of, if you really think about this, what's good for the company is going to be good for the family.
Mm-hmm.
What's good for the family isn't always necessarily good for the company. So you
Right.
always have to do what's right for the company. And I think that's the message you have to be tough about that.
So would you say that they are more of a business family than a family business? I mean, how would you?
That's a good call. I don't know. They're incredibly active and
Mm-hmm.
and rightfully so. And they own it, and their name is famous, and they've
Mm-hmm.
got enormous amount of history, and experience running it. So I don't know which one that would qualify for.
Sure.
I would say that they're even though they're not running the operational day-to-day type of things, they're definitely active when it comes to particularly certain parts of it, winemaking being one of them,
Yeah.
and grape growing. Yeah.
We have an event. We partner with Orange Kiwi on this lemonade lab. As you know, you've been a part of it in the past, and probably will be going forward, I hope. One of the modules we have coming up, in fact, I think it's the next one we have coming up, is called Building Your Board. And the idea is to help family businesses really look at whether they don't have a board yet. Okay, let's get started. What are the key components that you need to get it rolling? Maybe the board isn't functioning adequately, so let's modify it. Or maybe the board is functioning like a well-oiled machine, and let's just maintain that it is, without giving away too much, because I know what happens in the boardroom stays in the boardroom, and it should. What can you share about where the board is, how it's made up, constituted, and any advice you might give to somebody who's either hasn't started yet, needs to fine tune, or needs to keep it running like a well-oiled machine? Where would you, without saying where you think yours is, unless you care to, that's not really my question, just your advice, because you've been doing this for so many years, and you're now obviously leading and running, board meetings for the family.
Yeah. Well, at least in my experience, I'm sure there's plenty of other sort of templates for this, but I think most boards are either very operational or they're very advisory. And my personal belief is that they should be advisory, not operational.
Mm-hmm.
Let
the people who know what they're doing operate.
Yeah, that's why you've got them in place. And in our particular case, they are quite advisory. But they're so close to the business that that their inputs are constant. But it is input, and I do make a difference between. Often the term I use is "thank you for your input" as opposed to "thank you for your direction."
Yeah.
And because it is a fine line there. This company, before I was here, they started with an advisory board, not a formal board. And so each kind of family member sort of brought in their friends or people that they wanted, they thought would be good to do. And then after that, they decided they wanted to have a formal board. So they created a formal board. And I think with that formal board, they learned a lot of what they wanted and what they didn't want. And one of the things that they learned that they wanted was that they wanted to have people that actually did have wine experience. The previous board didn't really have the wine experience. So it wasn't, I don't think it worked out well for them. So the current board, the way that we've structured it now is that the two brothers, Peter and Mark, are on the board. Their two eldest children, the eldest child of each is on the board. So there's 4 Mondavis on the board. Me is I guess number 5. And then we brought in 2 outside board members, both of whom came from the wine industry and have experience in the wine industry and specialization in certain areas within things as well. So one of them is a heavy up finance guy, and the other one is a heavy up on marketing and also a lot of other legal issues when it comes to land, et cetera, et cetera. So really a well-balanced board, and I think a very operational one from the standpoint that everybody respects each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about governance, right? You know, that's really what it is.
Yeah. So much more of an advisory role than the fiduciary. The board
Right.
doesn't really call the shots as far as the operation is what I'm hearing you say for your particular organization. There are others obviously that they do, but
without, and you know, the idea is that once the budgets are approved, then go execute them, Judd. You and your team go execute them.
Yeah.
We approved it, so ergo.
Right. And it works because they trust you. They wouldn't have brought you in there. You're not a figurehead who came in from the outside just because they needed someone to create peace in the organization and the family. No. You really have that operational experience and background to be trusted by the family, from what I know, to implement, to execute, but also implement those decisions and create the decisions as well. Right. So if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
You know what? I think what I'd be trying to play on the Champions Tour is what I.
There you go. Right on. You and me both. You and me both. We're both old enough, so why not?
I would be playing golf as much as I possibly can, and see if I couldn't make a few bucks doing that.
There you go. You a good golfer?
No, that's.
Well, define good, right?
I used to be pretty decent. I just don't get a chance to play anymore, right? Because I work for a family.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Well, all you old baseball players are pretty good golfers. You know, I know a lot of the best non-professional golfers that I've played golf with that have athletic background tend to come from baseball. You played baseball at UCLA. Can you talk a little bit about? I'd love to hear a little bit about that, but also I'd like to hear how that has shaped you into what you chose in your career, because there's a lot of discipline that comes from playing D1 athletics.
Yeah. So baseball was, that wasn't my life goal. It wasn't like I was going to be a professional baseball player. I just happened to be good at it. And I applied to one college and got in, and then I was a walk-on and I made the team. So effectively, I knocked some guy who was on scholarship out.
There you go, knocked him off. That's all right.
And
the dog-eat-dog world, right?
Yeah, well, I didn't really know it at the time, and I was a little bit young for my class. So I started college when I was 17, and turned 18 my freshman year, and suddenly I'm playing ball, and it was 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, 12 months out of the year. You know, it's basically a full-time job. And I think, unfortunately, what happened for me was it's the good news, bad news. My father was a sort of a self-made guy, and I was the fourth of four children, and he was trying to go out with a bang. He really wanted to score big on that one final deal. Well, that one final deal bankrupted him. And so the end of my freshman year of college, he and my older brother sat down with me and said, Dad's lost everything and he can't support you anymore. You're on your own. So
get really good and get a scholarship or go get a job.
Yeah. So that was sort of the life decision. So I spent another year at UCLA. So I played 2 years at UCLA. And then I made that decision that I was going to transfer schools to a less expensive school. And you got to understand, back then, schools were not very expensive. My tuition at UCLA was $211 a quarter.
Wow. Yeah, that's changed a little bit.
Yeah, it really has.
A couple more zeros after that now.
Right. And so I took about 6 months off and waited tables to make enough money. And I transferred up to Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, and where the tuition was $66 a quarter.
Yeah.
And the rent on my house was $83 a month that I paid. So it was but I was waiting tables 5 nights a week. Interestingly, had I continued playing and wanted to play at UCLA, the guy that had at Cal Poly, the guy who just left Cal Poly was Ozzie Smith. So I would have, and I was a shortstop. So that would have been, but I had made that life decision that I was going to stop playing ball and get a little more serious about what I was going to do in the future. Sure. But I will tell you that I think that the biggest lesson that I learned from playing D1 ball was discipline. Mm-hmm. It was how to use your time wisely, how to win and how to lose. It wasn't all about winning at all costs. It was how you won. But I think that discipline of an athlete, a higher level athlete, has served me really well for what I've done in my career. It's a very it's almost like breaking things down into the most empirical form. Like if you're fielding a ground ball, or you're hitting a curveball, or you're hitting a fastball, you have to break it down into really empirical things so that you can, process and move forward. And I think that's what business is. You have to strip it from everything, figure out everything that's going on, and then rebuild from the most empirical level.
You said a term there, and I'm going to focus in on that for a second. How you won. So I'm going to take that, how you won and how you lost. Talk about that. So there's winning and there's losing, but more importantly than that, there's how you win and how you lose. What is, when you hear those two terms, what comes up for you?
I think, and this is going to sound terrible, but I think people who maybe didn't play at a high level, maybe played sports, maybe they didn't. Winning is everything, and even if they cheat to win,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or if they hurt somebody else to win, that's the all important thing to them. And I don't think that when you get to a certain level, that happens anymore. I think what ends up happening is that that you have a role to play, and you're going to do your best job at doing it. And if everybody's doing that together, we'll probably end up in a good place. But ultimately, it's like I think about a football team. A football team where the offense is just crushing it, and they scored 50 points, but defense gave up 60 points, and you lost the game. You don't see the office saying, God, I hate the defense. They're terrible.
Yeah, we did our job. Yeah, exactly.
It's because it's one team, and I think that's I think you learn that through sports, and the metaphors of sports are like way overdone, and some people hate them, but the truth is that they are metaphors for life too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, it's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game, and
Exactly.
that comes right into everything in life.
Yeah.
Who have been some of your early mentors or leaders that have influenced you, and maybe those even now that might?
Yeah.
Whether
Well,
they're
my
famous
brother.
or not. Yeah, your brother, is that Craig?
Yeah, Craig, my older brother, he's the oldest brother, and he was sort of my baseball coach at a young age, and he had he's done really well for himself in the world of baseball, and I was his first experiment.
Nice.
And at the same time, he was also the guy that turned me on to wine. So here I made my career out of wine, and he made his career out of baseball. We sort of helped each other out. So we definitely, recognize that within each other. And the weird thing is we also look a lot alike, even though there's a 12-year difference.
Yeah.
So I think he was a big influence on me. That when a guy that I was first working for when I got into the wine industry, I was working for a retailer in Southern California, in Glendale, a place called the Red Carpet. And this guy that owned it was a guy named John Viceni, and John was awesome. And he taught so much about, not about wine, but about customer service, about the importance of bending. The customer's always right, and bending over backwards for the customer, and in the work ethic behind that. He was really influenced me a lot. Robert Mondavi definitely influenced me a lot. He's the one that brought me up to Napa Valley from Nestle. So sure. I can't help but really be thankful for him. And I think that the key behind what Robert Mondavi taught me was culture, and the importance of culture of a company. And the culture at Robert Mondavi was never that sort of like, how there's some companies where they'll say like, well, you'll come up with some harebrained idea, and they're like, that's so stupid.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
The culture at Robert Mondavi was like, how can we make that happen? And it was like, even if it was like crazy, it was like, how can we make that happen? And it was we all the time.
Sure.
And I think that the company came first, the family came second. And I think that was really, really changed my life. And I thought it was really important. And so when I go forward after Robert Mondavi, I wanted to take all the best things of Robert Mondavi with me, and then jettison the bad things and get rid of those in other companies. So those are probably my biggest influences. Yeah.
So that sounds like that's the style that you've taken on as a leader as well, too. If somebody comes to you, it's less about whether it's a good idea, bad idea, or not sure, but hey, how can we do this? Let's figure out a way that we can work together and figure out together if this works. And if it doesn't, we'll figure it out together. If it does, we'll figure it out together.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great style. I think that we need more leaders like that in business and sports and politics and life in general, who look at that more as a, what can we do together on this?
It's coaching. I mean, if you played, you were a coach and you played ball, right?
Right.
Did you ever have a coach that like looked at you and said, "You idiot, that's so stupid how you're hitting or how you're fielding"? No.
All my football coaches were that way. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why I gravitated to baseball.
But I mean, those are not the successful coaches,
right?
The ones that work with what you've got and then cultivate it. Those are good coaches.
And that goes back to your point a minute ago, that sports really is a great metaphor for life. I mean, we all know teams are what it's all about in corporate America, and family business and sports and families and churches. Everything's in groups and teams, and really the productivity comes more from that team kind of brainstorming together. And I hate to overuse the word collaboration, but it really is important that those that try to make decisions and implement decisions in a vacuum, they say that it's lonely at the top. Well, if you're at the top and you're alone, you're not a leader, because if you're a leader, there are people there with you.
Yeah, so, that's exactly it.
Yeah. So you said that the wine business is as old as Jesus, as you alluded to earlier with the Antonelli family in Italy. Older than Jesus. That's true.
Yeah, it's about 8,000 years old. Yeah.
So let me ask a question that may not have an answer. What's new in the industry, or what's out there ahead for you, for your organization, for Charles Krug Winery?
Yeah. So I think, we're not going to invent new varietals. That's varieties of wines. That's, maybe we will, but that's not really where it's at. I think the biggest opportunity in the wine industry, particularly for people that are coming up, younger people that are coming up, is how we communicate to people. As you sort of alluded to before, there's a lot more wineries now, and it's a lot more crowded field. And how do you stand out in that crowd? You sent me the picture of the
at the grocery store. It's like, help, I don't know what to pick here. All I know is I'm looking for a Cabernet to go with my steak, and I can't see yours. And then you pointed out on the shelf where yours was. I was like, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that I think how we communicate to consumers has changed quite a bit. I mean, it used to be advertising, and now it's all on our phones, right? So it's a lot of Google Analytics, a lot of Google activity. How do we get in the hearts and minds of buyers to tell our story? That was another thing you asked about. Like what makes our point of differentiation, or what does our salespeople sell? They sell a story. Mm-hmm. And the story is, very fertile. And so I think if we can get that fertile story into people's minds and break through the clutter of the millions of people that are out there, I think that's from a marketing standpoint, that's nothing's changed. It's always been that way. It's just that the tools and the vehicles that we have to do that with have changed dramatically. And it used to be such a shotgun blast, right? Oh, I'm going to throw an ad in the newspaper or something like that. Well, now it's definitely a rifle shot. I mean, it is. I can guarantee you that my phone's going to have some little, pop up because of this conversation that we had.
Sure. What do you tell? It's focusing on that fourth generation of Mondavis, or let's talk to as you probably know, I think I've shared with you that we teach a family business dynamics class down here at Cal State Fullerton on Monday nights. I'm part of that, along with Tam, who you've met,
right,
at least virtually on our little screens here.
Mm-hmm.
The students that may be listening, whether they're in a family business, whether they're not in a family business, what advice as a mentor now for yourself? I know you can't just say, hey, I'm going to mentor that person. It's more of a natural, almost kind of a marriage. There has to be chemistry to make it work. But as you mentor, or as you give advice to that younger generation that might be in a family business, what would be some points of advice you might give?
I think the most important thing any family member can do is to get experience outside of the family, and not be reliant on their name in their industry. Get outside of their industry if they can. I think it's really, really important to do that. That doesn't mean that you're not going to spend time and come back, but broaden your horizon. And I think some companies even make that a mandatory, and I think it's a good mandatory. I think that's probably the most important thing they can do. Second part of that is in no way, shape, or form think that you're entitled to be the CEO when you come back.
Yeah.
We all have to pay our dues, and I think that's part of the culture that we're talking about. I think the most important part of any company is culture, and if you've got family members who embrace that kind of culture, they belong. They should come back, and they should be involved with it, but they need to help cultivate it, and not be entitled behind it. We've got our G4 is now pregnant. So we're going to have our G5 coming along.
Nice. Very cool. Very nice. It just keeps coming. The succession it'll happen whether we want it to or not. That's great. So I'm going to come up there. I put on my LinkedIn tag when I talked about this podcast today, and when we're done recording and it's ready to go up, when I put it up tomorrow, I'm going to do this again. But so when my family or my family businesses and I come up a month, a year, 6 months, whenever that's allowable for us all to go up there. And I know we can to a certain extent now, but let's say there's 10 of us coming up there, or 2 of us coming up there on a weekend. Where are you taking us first? So you meet us at the gate that's behind you in your virtual picture here. Yeah. Where you're taking us first and why?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take you into the cellar, because it's a historical building. And there's such a story that goes on just behind the building, let alone the family. And then I'll take you into we have a reserve room in there. And on the wall, that dates back to our vintage selection wine going back to 1944, sorry. And it's just a liquid wall of history. It's just visually so stimulating. But then after that, I'd probably take you out into the vineyards, because it all starts in the vineyards. And to me, that's what it's all about. And even like if you came out in let's say in March, the vineyards they're dormant, they're pruned, there's nothing going on, but there is stuff going on. There's stuff going on in the soil, there's stuff going on in the air. And so it all starts with grapes. And so I really like to teach people about vineyards and about where where everything starts is in the soil. But then we'd sit down and we taste wine, because you got to taste wines. You got to taste wines. That's part of the deal.
So going back to my lack of experience and the lack of experience of, many of our listeners today probably know wine as well as anybody does. Maybe not as well as you do, because they haven't worked in it day in and day out for 40 years, but they probably know it pretty well. But a lot of us don't. I go to Temecula from time to time because it's close to where I live. I've been up to Napa. I've been up into Sonoma. I've been to wine country. I've not yet been to Tuscany, but that's on the bucket list to go to Italy. I've been to Italy, but not to the wine part of it. Yep. What can the novice see as we drive through? If I were driving the roads there behind you up in Napa Valley, there probably isn't much I could see that would tell me if it's a bad, good, great wine. Is there anything that the naked eye to the novice can look for as we're looking at, maybe as you walk me through the vineyards? What can I be looking for that can tell me anything about what might be in my glass eventually?
That would be really hard to do, actually, just looking at it. Now, I think that probably the best thing to do is if you're driving along and you're going to see a name, you're going to go, yeah, I've never even heard of that winery before. Chances are that's going to happen. Yeah. I mean, there's still wineries that I go to, and I'm like, I didn't even know that existed. I do my research. I pull up Vivino, I pull up Google, whatever it is, I'll find out what it is and see if there's a story behind it. The first thing I want to find out about is the story. You don't have to have your own grapes. You don't have to have vineyards, to make wine. You can buy the grapes. You can do whatever you want. You don't need a big, beautiful winery either. You can have a garage. I have a shed in my backyard. That's my winery.
Nice. Very cool.
So I think you want to find out, it's like any other company. You want to find out who's behind it too. Who are these people behind it? I want to know their story. And do I trust them? And do I like them? And do my friends like them? I definitely look into this, my friends. Have you ever had these wines before? What do you think about them? Yeah. What's good there?
Like you said, anything, that pizzeria, have you ever tried it? Oh, let's try it. It looks pretty good.
Yeah. That film, that book, that's whatever it is, do the same thing. But and the other thing is with Napa Valley, one thing you have to know about Napa is that it is a very special place. It's only 30 miles long and 5 miles wide. It's got more soil structures in it than any place on the face of the planet. It is, and what that means is that there's more diversity in the flavors of the wines that come from it, because the vines eat the soil turns it into grapes. And if you've got very diverse soils, you're going to have very diverse wines. And most people don't know that California represents about 90 to 91% of all the wine produced in the United States, and every state in the union grows grapes. And when I ask the question, how much comes from Napa Valley, people say, oh, 40, 50, 70%. And the answer is 4%.
Wow.
So it's a very small, very special place. And the other thing about Napa Valley is it's 50 years ago it was the ag preserve. So it is preserved. It's not going to turn into Silicon Valley. It has to be agriculture. So you're just surrounded by beautiful vineyards all over the place. And then on top of that, you've got great restaurants. You've got great hiking. It's really a paradise in so many ways. You don't have to just do wine here.
So you look at a year on a brand or a vintage or I don't even know what word to use. That's how little I know about it. Is the year, you look at it and say, well, 2017, well, that was a really dry year. So that's a great year for more of the Chardonnay, but not so much the Cab. Or does the climate dictate by the varietal of wine what's good and what's not as good?
Yeah, so vintage really does matter. It's remember back when we were kids, the vintage of a car mattered, right?
67 Mustang.
Yeah, bingo. Somewhere along the line that all became unimportant, but for wine it's very, very important. Now, fortunately, because California is blessed with pretty amazing weather, it's very hard to find a bad vintage. There's been just a couple of vintages that have been sort of challenging in the last 20 years. And so, a lot of people would look at 1998, a lot of rain at the wrong time. 2011, same thing. Early, you said 2017. Well, the 2017 is the year where basically all of Napa was on fire. And did that mean that we have what they call smoke taint? Well, you taste the 2017s, that ours at least, and they're beautiful wines, and there's no issues with the smoke. So you do want to, know your vintage, particularly when you're going to other parts of the world where you're maybe not so familiar with what the weather is, and maybe some parts of the weather are not as gratuitous as what it is in California. There's definitely better vintages than others. California is pretty blessed. It's not a whole lot of bad vintages, to be honest with you.
I could just go on and keep asking you questions about points and about wines from different parts of different, areas. I've had great wine, what I thought was great, grown in Halifax, Nova Scotia, or Keystone, South Dakota, or here in Southern California, and the climates are obviously dramatically different.
Right.
What do you look for? If you're, obviously, you know what you like, and you've been around this for a long, long time, but when you go to other regions of the world, what are you looking for with a wine?
Yeah, I think mainly I look at the people behind it, so who's behind that winemaking, and what's their background? Are they, brand new to the game? Are they very science oriented, or are they, very traditional oriented? Is it old world? Is it new world? This is sort of sommelier training too, but I definitely look at I do look at their terroir, their vineyards. I do want to see how they look, how they're groomed, how they're pruned, how they're, what they're taking a look at. But I'm a geek that way. I'm going to look at that because that's part of my training. But ultimately, bottom line, you look for what's in the glass. What does it taste like? That's all you can ultimately trust is your own sense of like, man, that tastes really good. I want to buy that.
Yeah. So last couple of questions for you here, and then I'll let you go. My last question, just to tee it up for you, don't answer it yet, but the last question, like I do on all my episodes, is going to be what's in your heart, because that's the name of the podcast, From the Heart. So just so you know, that's coming. So maybe have a minute to process that. Normally I don't give my guests that opportunity, but I'll just, for some reason, I feel like I want to give that to you, because I think everything that's in your heart is everything you just shared for the last hour. But what would you, well, first of all, best place to, how do we find you? I mean, obviously you've got a website and you're in pretty much every store, but just if somebody's never tried Charles Krug wine before, what would you tell them as far as the best place to go try to find it? And
Well,
then,
I would go to the website. I would go to charleskrug.com.
yeah, it's a beautiful website and has a great video that tells a little bit of the story too.
Right. And also so much of the wine that we produce and taste at the tasting room are not the wines that you taste out and that you see in the stores. So a lot of small, really small production, very high quality wines that we sell online or at the winery itself. So I definitely go to the website to check it out. The other thing that's kind of cool, and we just added this feature, and we were really shocked at how popular it's been, is we do have a chat session, a chat box on the website, and people really get engaged with that. And so much so that we have to have a man. We thought, oh yeah, every once in a while somebody might throw a chat in. No, it's like nonstop. Yeah. And it's a great way to ask questions, if you don't want to just pick up the phone, but otherwise just pick up the phone and talk to us. And that's a really easy one too. It's 1-888-SIP-KRUG.
So nice. I like it.
Makes it pretty easy.
Yeah. We'll put that in the notes on this podcast. And also what I'll do on the video aspect of it, on the YouTube, when we post this, we'll also, for those that are watching and those listening as well, if you go to our YouTube channel, and we'll put that in the notes on how to get there, we'll put that little 3 to 4 minute video that's on their website. It's really nice. We've used it. We've done a virtual wine tasting, for those that don't know, with my Family Business Directors Alliance around North America. We did a great virtual tour and wine tasting with Judd and some of his team back in June. It's really, really special. It's pretty fun to do.
And that's what we're doing a lot of now. With COVID and people not traveling, we're doing probably 20 of these Zoom tastings a week.
Nice. So you send the wine out in advance, people buy it, they get it delivered, and then you do it.
Yeah, they buy it. And a lot of it starts with our club members, the members of our club, and then they'll invite like 8 or 9 or 10 of their friends, and they sort of have a little virtual tasting. And then we always offer something a little bit special for to entice people to buy. Yeah. And they always buy, and
worked with me.
To do it. Yeah.
Yeah, worked with me.
So.
There's never a day that I don't have several bottles of your wine in my house. So
yeah, there you go.
As the inventory is getting low, we reorder. So
yeah, love it.
So what's the best way for people to reach you if they want to reach specifically to you for any reason?
You know what? I'm the most open CEO on the face of the planet. So I freely give out my cell phone number. First of all, my email is just jwallenbrock@cmondavi.com. So that's really easy. And then, but my phone number is 707-486-6724. And that is my cell is a great way to reach me. I used to have my own label for about 15 years, and a lot of times when people pop the cork, you're going to see an 800 number on the cork, or you're going to see a website on the cork. It was my cell phone number. Cork.
I love that. And trust me, folks, he does give that out. I think I'd known him for a week and I already had his cell phone number, and I was texting him already, and he responds. So even when you're in a grocery store and you're not sure what to get, as he alluded to on this interview more than once, I was one day just looking for, a specific wine for a specific purpose, and took a picture of the 5 shelves of hundreds of different wines, whether it's a Merlot or a Cab or what have you. And he pointed me in the right direction, and he will with you as well. So.
And by the way, the website does have a retailer locator on it too.
Okay, good.
So if you're somewhere and you just plug in your zip code wherever you happen to be, it'll pop up to see where our wines are, also in your stores there too.
Is there any part of the Charles Krug story or the Judd Wallenbrock story that you wish that we would have talked about that I missed?
I think, it's for me, everything about wine is about the passion for wine, and just embracing it and getting involved with it. I love family. I love everything about it, but ultimately wine is really just a very passionate, product. And I hope people aren't afraid of it, and that they try wines right and left, and they're not too shy to seek advice from either a good wine shop or just friends. Just we none of us know everything. I can just tell you that right now. So the best way to learn is just to try. Last question before I go to my what's in your heart question. It just popped into my head.
in 30 seconds, can you describe the difference between a $15 bottle of cab and a $75 bottle of cab other than 60 bucks?
Yeah, the biggest difference is going to be where it comes from.
Okay.
So, you know, if you can, price and quality in wine are pretty well mirrored. They do a really, you know, it's not like people are putting crap in a bottle and charging $75 for it. And if it's $75, there's probably a good reason for it. And more than likely it's because it's coming from very, very special vineyards in a very, very special location, and probably not very much of it made. So it's sort of supply and demand as well. But that doesn't mean that that $15 bottle of wine isn't an awesome bottle of wine for you specifically at a specific time.
Sure.
I mean, certainly, you know, $15, I can drink $15 bottles of wine a couple times a week. I can't drink a $75 bottle of wine a couple times a week.
Exactly. Yeah. Without, you know, not paying your light bills or something like that. So
No, exactly.
Very cool. Well, Judd, it's always just an honor for me to get time with you. And I know you're a busy man and you've got a lot going on, and especially coming out of all these fires and everything, literal and figurative fires. It's been a fire of a year with all that's been going on. We didn't even talk about COVID, and I know that the impact on you actually, you know, it's just you've shifted into other avenues a little bit because of limitations with COVID. So let me just finish like I already teed up. Again, thank you for your time, and I'll stop the recording after you give your answer here. So, Judd Wallenbrock, what's in your heart?
You know, what's in my heart is my family. I'm sitting here at home right now, although it looks like I'm sitting in front of the winery.
There you go.
And I've got 3 children, and they're all adults. You know, the youngest is 19; she's away at college, but the other 2 are back home. And it's the strangest thing to. I think a lot of people, when you get to a certain age, it's like, come on, leave the house, man, get out of here. I'm kind of embracing the fact that they're here. I really like it, because you don't know how much longer they will be, you know? And so, yeah, family, that's what's in my heart.